Hi everyone. Today I wanted to comment very briefly on what is happening in Minneapolis. This is an extension of capital defending itself while in decay, which is fascism. Some people call it tyranny, some people call it authoritarianism, but I think it's more productive and germane to call it fascism because fascism is what most accurately describes what has happened, not just with Alex Pretti and Renee Good, but Keith Porter and many other victims of police violence. And that's something that we have to remember here is this is police action versus worker action. Workers are being killed for exercising their basic human rights through the Constitution being violated by police actors. Workers being betrayed by other workers, class traitors, cops being class traitors, first and foremost within a race war, within a war of culture, various overlapping factors, but the end-all be-all is that ICE are first and foremost antagonizing racial minorities and other citizens, notably white American citizens exercising their First and Second Amendment rights, are being targeted by police violence. They are being taken out of their normal privileged state and put into the same state of exception mid-crisis that other marginalized groups normally exist within. So Alex Pretti, for instance, when he was killed exercising his right to record police agents and also his right to bear arms. He was surrounded, beaten, and shot to death for helping a woman who had been attacked within a shared community. He was not attacking the officers, though the officers will view it as an attack when they say he was obviously an assassin. So this is Darvo and obscurantism within fascism as a death cult. Fascism is capital in decay that rescinds the rights of the citizenry to bring imperialism home to empire and hopefully in the eyes of the state prepare the state once more for war abroad. So this is Fascism 101. It's not anything new. It is endemic to the United States, which is a settler-colonial project that has been a settler-colonial project since its beginning. America has always been a settler project. It has always been, for all intents and purposes, a police state. The police and the state apparatus go hand in hand since ancient Athens into the present space and time. And they have evolved out of feudalism, the Enlightenment, and capitalism in its earlier forms into its more recent late-stage forms to defend capital as capital decays by design. And any aspect of fascism that ostensibly could be projected elsewhere is ultimately homegrown. The Nazis were inspired by America, and various other places were as well. You could make the argument, of course, that settler colonialism was something that originated somewhere else with the Irish Catholics and the English Protestants and the genocide that they committed one versus the other as being so-called racially inferior. There were also the Portuguese and the various forms of genocide that they conducted. Christopher Columbus and company who ruled over the areas that they did and basically inspired what came to be settler colonialism as we think of it today as well. There's a lot of different pieces that go into the same pot, but fascism, as far as that goes, is something that was devised through American genocide. there were all these things that went into the same aforementioned pot, and then out of that came the American settler-colonial project, which through and through was a police state. It started off as slave catchers and various people who, through divine right into Enlightenment thinking under Cartesian dualism, thought that they were the owners of the earth, and through that they would effectively enslave the planet, starting through a system of preferential mistreatment. Some people would be mistreated worse than others. It is effectively a caste system, the great chain of being, into more recent iterations of the same basic idea. Under Cartesian thought, you have thinking things versus extended things. Thinking things through the state being white, straight, and male, first and foremost, with various forms of tokenism. Obviously, you see that with ICE and Border Patrol, police action where different people tokenize to betray their own, but the central belief system is white, straight, and male, European, Christian, what have you, first and foremost, under a Protestant ethic. So the police violence that we're seeing now in Minneapolis is a result of capital and decay, the chickens coming home to roost in the imperial core under a state of exception, furthering the abjection process by conducting essentially business as normal. This is normal, but the normal aspects of police violence are being committed against people who normally have some degree of protection. Except now, fascism is when they lower the masks and they start attacking anyone who challenges the state, because the illusion of law and order, which again is an illusion, and establishment politics have failed, and democracy, which is something that is built on slavery and lies, benefiting a small group of people while exploiting a large group of people, those lies have become transparent. And in light of that transparency, they are conducting violence against anyone who resists. And resisting can be just enacting and following through on your basic human rights. It's workers versus the state. And anything that might normally be used as a means of protection against the state through the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, etc., are now being used as excuses, Darvo, and obscurantism for the state to kill workers. But this is how it's always been. It's just that, generally speaking, there are various privileges that white workers have, and that's not to say that they don't experience violence as well. Women, for instance, are killed all the time, but they tend to be killed within a domestic sphere, not out in the street. And the kind of violence that's being committed against people who are normally seen as human among the middle class, namely white men, white women, straight actors, first and foremost, are now being killed alongside the usual suspects. It saw everyone as a threat, not just the ones on the so-called other side. So, to defend ourselves against that requires widespread worker action immediately, everywhere. You have to starve the system of oxygen. Worker demand through class war tied to race and culture is something that requires an immediate response to, again, choke the system of any ability to conduct violence. And the violence that they're conducting is ultimately surface level if they can't penetrate into our communities and do what they want at will. The killing of Alex Pretti, Renee Good, Keith Porter, George Floyd, going all the way back centuries to various protesters and abolitionists and people challenging capital more broadly through different aspects of resistance, be it class, culture, and or race, will be persecuted and burned at the stake. But the reality is the state can't function the way that it normally does, conducting violence against people, if it is overwhelmed. And the only way to effectively do that is to resist everywhere. It has to become normal for people to resist the government, because the government is something that was always targeting citizens. But now it's doing it more aggressively in ways where the middle class has been weaponized against the state. And this is something that needs to continue. It needs to increase, because otherwise, when you're dealing with fascism, which is effectively a cancer, it will continue to spread. And if it is unaddressed through this spreading, it will infect all aspects of society in ways where when they lie to your face and say, hey, this was a justified killing, the victim in this case is us, not the person we murdered in broad daylight, people who are infected will take up the lie. They will become rabid, as the state has become rabid, and it eats itself alive. And those who pay the price will ultimately be workers, first and foremost, which is why, in times of crisis, Gramsci said, the old world is dying, the new world struggles to be born, now is the time of monsters. And the monsters in this case are both the state conducting violence against workers, but also workers struggling to regain their humanity through positions of alienation where they are often fetishized as victims, just as Renee Good was fetishized, just as George Floyd was fetishized, so on and so forth. And we have to take the opportunity to use this as a launching point through people who are martyred by the state to say, look, martyrdom is ultimately a bad thing. Recognizing the humanity of the victims isn't wrong, and rather we rise up together as workers to stand against fascism in a way where literally with enough bodies in the street, they expose themselves perfidiously as the false preachers that they are. And the more that they continue to lie, the more that they continue to strike down people who are exercising their basic human rights through their state-given rights, the concessions that the state gave them, which the Bill of Rights and the other amendments ultimately are, they will continue to lose goodwill in the eyes of the public, but also tire themselves out when ultimately someone is being attacked by a rapist. The hard reality of the situation is you have to prevent the rapist from gaining entry, but also you have to tire them out because the state ultimately rapes by design. This is all completely normal to them. It was normal for Christopher Columbus. It was normal for various American presidents, and it is normal now for the people who were hired by the president's men. So this is something that is just cloak and dagger behavior, normal operations of the state, and it's challenged the same way it's always been challenged. And the first general strike in Minneapolis in 80 years, Minnesota in 80 years in any event, from what I understand. So same shit, different century, except it has to become a nationwide thing, and it has to become year-round. It's the only way to stop this, and not just stop fascism, but to transform the state away from itself and into something that is less predatory by design. But that is a conversation for another day. Right now, I just wanted to get a video out talking about Pretti, Good, Porter, and various other victims, past and present, regarding what's happening currently, which is ultimately just the hair of the dog. It is the tip of the spear. And it's really encouraging to see people coming together quite quickly to stand not just for white people, but for our neighbors who are not white, who share the same community. There are plenty of people who aren't white in Minneapolis, for instance. There's a large indigenous community. There are racial minorities that live here, and the middle class is coming together and solidarizing versus the state, which basically shot itself in the foot by attempting to engage in a fascist uprising through state mechanisms. And you have the federal government trying to act out against the various states that don't toe the line. And the difference between the governor and the local police and actors among the working class who don't betray is being played out front and center right now as ICE continue to terrorize the city. The more that they try, the more that we don't let them in, and the more that they scratch us and kill workers, the more that we stand together. This is a form of labor action. It's not symbolic unto itself. There's a symbolic element, but ultimately this is a form of action, resisting. The way that you resist when someone tries to harm you and your friends is you stand together and you prevent that any way that you can. And the more that it can happen without people resorting to physical violence and attacking police officers, which ultimately I imagine will happen intermittently. It's probably something that ICE is very much definitely trying to instigate, but for the time being anyways, by and large, ICE are just the open aggressors in this situation, and the more that they continue to do that, the less power that they ultimately have, and they can be narrowed down, and the cancer will shrink. It will be contained and ultimately expunged. But this takes time, and this ultimately requires struggle, as Frederick Douglass would say. In any event, that's all I wanted to say on the subject. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all of the people coming together, standing out there in that freezing-ass, cold Minnesota winter to challenge these pigs. It's important, it's necessary, and your sacrifice is nothing but commendable. Solidarity, comrades. Stay safe out there, and until next time, good luck.